Hi, we're here today with Dr. Glen. You are going to introduce your theory of everything.
And today we're breaking that down to the 5 phases of health, which is a section of the theory. The 5 phases of health comes out of European biological medicine. There was a man who was a hydrologist, so he was in charge of the water supply for the nation of France, starting back in the 1930s. And he was also an epidemiologist, meaning he was studying the health of the people. His responsibility was to make sure that everybody's getting healthy water. And one of the first things that he noticed was that people in different communities where they had different sources of water, different water supplies, were dying of different diseases. So he began studying and measuring the water to see what's the difference in the water, and is that really connected to the types of health issues that people were having. And he indeed found an extremely high correlation between the type of water and the types of disease that were happening. Beyond that, he began to develop his measurements to measure the blood in the people to see, how the water, which is over 99% of the compounds, the chemicals in the body, the molecules are water molecules. And so to be able to measure that, he wanted to have a standard to see what's normal, what's healthy, what's good. And so what he did there was to measure young people who were in athletic programs at universities, very healthy, young, active people. And so that was his standard of healthy blood. And from there he could see in what direction the terrain, the milieu in the body was off, and how that matched the milieu, the terrain of the water that the people were drinking. So in that balanced zone that we all want to strive for optimum health, of course we need to be, well, it's nice to be young, but it's certainly important to be physically active, as his subjects were, the university students in athletic programs. And diet, of course, is important, and he would take food and blend it and measure the pH and what they call the RH2. It's similar to what we refer to as ORP, or oxidation reduction potential in America. Slightly different measure. ORP is part of what goes into RH2. RH2 is, if you're familiar with pH, pH is potential hydrogen, which refers to the hydrogen nucleus. The nucleus of the hydrogen atom is a proton. So it's really measuring protons. We call it potential hydrogen in chemistry, but if we're physicists, we know it's measuring protons. And RH2 is measuring the H2 molecule, the hydrogen molecule of 2 hydrogen atoms together, which to make that atom you need electrons, not just the 2 protons. You need 2 electrons to hold the 2 protons together. And so it's actually a measure of electrons, the RH2, or the oxidation reduction potential. Electrons are antioxidants, or antioxidants are by definition electron donors. We hear about that aspect of the fullness of the model in our culture. But an electron is the ultimate antioxidant, because it's easy to donate an electron when you are an electron. You don't have to do much. And in fact, when there's electrons in the body, we don't have to use up our nutritional antioxidants, our herbal and food source antioxidants, our vitamin antioxidants like vitamin A and C and E. So we can have electrons in our water or not. So water that's rich in electrons is actually rejuvenating and antioxidant, and preserves our vitamins and our bioflavonoids and other things in the diet that have antioxidant function, that often will have other functions, like vitamins by definition have other functions that are essential for life. And if we're using them to stop our body from burning down, from oxidizing, then we no longer have them for those other functions, like vitamin C to repair connective tissue and things like that. So if the path I want to lead you on to understand this is from that place of balance, which I call phase 5, the peak of health. The 5 is the top level of health, 1 would be the lowest. We're going to take a walk today from 5 and down to level 1, and see what kinds of illnesses and diseases we tend to produce in our body, what kinds of other things tend to want to live in our body when we're out of balance. So in phase 5, we're basically dealing with life stresses, of course. Even if we're young and athletic and healthy and drinking the right water, we still have issues that we deal with, but it's out here, external in our life. So psycho-emotional issues, financial issues, those sorts of things. Hormonal issues on the internal level. And certainly, young people go through hormonal stresses with maturation. And then we get to be more stable in that area as we age. But we may have, let's say, allergies. That would be phase 4. As we get out of balance enough, our immune system has to begin to work a little extra hard to clean out foreign material, things that we're sensitive or allergic to, things that don't belong in the body, that create an irritation. And if those, the immune system maybe makes an antibody, an allergic reaction, combines with the antigen, that's a very large molecule. It's kind of challenging to filter that out the kidneys. The kidneys are the high pressure filter system for the blood. And so if that's backing up in our blood, and now we have these immune complexes throughout the body up to here, the immune system has to try to burn them, break them down oxidatively in the tissues where they're built up to, because they can't get out the kidneys. So allergies that we find, the symptoms maybe in the head and sinus, upper respiratory area, don't mean that that's the cause. The symptom is usually the tail end, the effect of an underlying cause. So if you have allergy symptoms, it's not necessarily the only way to deal with that by, number 1, avoiding the allergen, number 2, suppressing the symptom with, say, a medication like an antihistamine that kind of pushes it, keeps it in, keeps the body from eliminating locally, keeps the inflammation down from breaking down the irritants locally. And there's some indication that chronically taking antihistamines increases the risk for deeper diseases, things like cancer in the sinus areas or in the brain. Go ahead.
Are you saying that allergies are in the phase 5?
Phase 4.
Oh, phase 4.
Yeah. So from phase 5, if we have enough stress, enough irritant, enough toxin that we're exposed to that we can't eliminate through the normal channels, the skin, the liver, through the bowels, the kidneys, then the immune system is responsible for cleaning it up locally in the tissues. And if those are organic things, then we can actually oxidize and break them down in that local tissue. And that's what inflammation is for. The body's not dumb. It actually has a purpose for inflammation. It has a purpose that the immune system produces free radicals that create oxidation, that may also have some side effects and do some damage. So ideally we want to be able to clean out efficiently and not have to do those local cleanses. But in fact, if we have to clean out a local area, when the immune system does that, say it's the flu, and your body is creating inflammation in the gut to clean out a viral infection in the intestinal tract, that's actually cleaning out everything that's there, not just the virus. It's cleaning out all the other toxins that have built up. And so people who have some fevers once or twice a year, get the flu, that's actually a preventive action of the immune system to prevent buildup of toxins to the point where we get things like cancer and degenerative disease that would be in the low level of health that we're talking about, moving toward in this story. So in phase 4, he was looking at death certificates as a first level of identifying these patterns. So he wasn't looking at allergic reactions so much, but he was seeing that in communities where there was a phase 4, a high level of energy in the water, mineral waters, having a lot of alkaline minerals, but also having acid minerals, having a lot of electrons, but also a lot of protons. There's just a lot of stuff in that water. That's a lot of stuff for the body to process and clean out. And so there'd be tendency in those populations for more allergies. But the death certificates, he found things like more heart attacks happened to be a particular disease that we're susceptible to when our body just has too much on its plate. too much to do. The blood is full of stuff that doesn't belong there, and it actually becomes acidic because of the extra protons, the acids there, and that acidic blood becomes thick, and it doesn't perfuse, it doesn't go through the vessels so easily, it doesn't get oxygen to the heart, and you can have clotting, etc. So if we're not able to clean out, and then the toxins start to deposit, they sort of crystallize, they just, like a glass full of dirty water, if you let it sit, it's going to form, it's going to cake onto the sides. The body will store toxins in areas that have been injured, whether it's trauma or a chemical toxin exposure in a tissue, making it that a damaged tissue, even a surgery. When we cut tissue and we form scar tissue never has as much circulation flowing through it as our natural healthy tissue. So all those damages then lead to phase 3, where we're storing toxins in the tissues, and that becomes, if you're a cell, the storage is going to be outside the cell at this point, but that means it's between you and your source of supply. How can you breathe if there's all this junk between you and the blood vessel, the capillary bed? How can you eliminate waste if there's all this stuff, a full closet around you, between you and the lymph vessel to get wastes out that don't fit into the blood vessels? And how can you communicate with the rest of the body if there's that stuff blocking between the cell and the autonomic nervous system nerve endings, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerve endings that regulate the function of all our tissues, or almost all. So in that case, the cell becomes kind of, it's isolated from the rest of the body, and you can actually, a cell could actually die. And when it does die and you have dead matter there, the rest of your body has a hard time even knowing that's happening, or how to get in there and clean it out. So now you have dead matter. And what grows on dead matter? Fungus. If you're in the forest and you see a dead tree, there's going to be fungus growing on it. And fungus is the recycler of dead material. And our body has symbiotic, friendly fungi in its system. In fact, we're a symbiotic organism. We're actually a community already within the human body. Even at a first order, the mitochondria are bacteria that have completely different genetics. We don't inherit them from our fathers, only from our mothers. So it's a totally different organism than the human DNA that we think of in the nucleus of the cell. So we get fungal conditions. And it tends to be a fairly stable state. It's sort of a standoff. It's, the fungus is doing its thing where we can't do our thing, and it's keeping us alive. You'll tend to have maybe low body temperature, your metabolism is blocked, the energy is low, and that can go on for a long time.
Could you give some examples about how that would show up, what this fungus is doing, or what diseases? Back in the old days, it would be things like tuberculosis. If you're looking at the death certificates, as Vincent was, you'd see, why is there tuberculosis in this community over here? Well, they don't have the mineral waters where the people were dying of heart attacks, but they have waters they still have the protons, but they're lacking the electrons. They don't have, electrons are how we get our energy from our food. Electrons form chemical bonds, and in plants, that's photosynthesis. Light from the sun comes in, energizes the electron, and that high energy electron is stored between a couple of carbon atoms. And then when we eat that as a sugar, for example, and goes into the cell and burns, we release that high energy electron, and we get lots of energy. We get about 36 ATP battery charges of our cellular batteries out of that one sugar. But in the case of fungal activity, that's not happening. A fungus doesn't have the aerobic oxygen-using mitochondria in it. It's fungal, which is actually what we are. We're actually, animals are descended from fungi. So we're like a fungus that has this bacterial helper, but in the case of this phase 3 terrain where the fungus is growing, our cell is there. If it's still alive, it's next to the fungus, growing in the extracellular medium, breaking down the dead stuff, and we're making 10% of our normal energy by fermentation, just like the fungus is getting
its energy through fermentation. We don't have enough oxygen. We don't, if the sugar will come into the cell and it'll ferment and turn into lactic acid. We know about lactic acid, in the muscles, that it can stay in there for years. You have a muscle that's just like feels hard and it doesn't move well, and it's maybe swollen. The cells begin to swell with that lactic acid because it's a sludge. It's a waste that builds up. It doesn't move easily, and it's full of protons. It's acidic, and when it gets into the blood, it makes the blood thick again. So, fungus, like I said, it tends to be a fairly stable condition, so we're not usually aware that that's going on in the body. If we take the blood and put it in a microscope, we may still not even see anything unless we know what to look for. There's approaches to microscopy where they look at live blood. There's a number of different researchers, starting with Dr. Enderlein in Germany, Gaston Naissance, and others, pretty much independently seeing the same things, because these are lines of research that aren't accepted in conventional journals, so conventional doctors don't know about it. But where they take the blood and watch it for 24 hours after it's taken out of the human body, and there's all kinds of different things that happen, even when you can't see anything right away, maybe after an hour or 2 hours, or maybe after 12 hours or 24 hours, suddenly there's a fungus growing in there. How did that get there? Now, if we saw that fungus in conventional medicine, first of all, we wouldn't look at the blood until we stain it. That means we've killed it. We've put in chemicals that kill the cells and fix it and stain it. And it makes it easier to see the contrast of some of the structures, but it means we're looking at it not in a living state, and we're not watching the progression of that living state as it deteriorates over time. But then if we see the fungus that grows out, we can say, oh, there's a fungal state there, and begin to recognize the more subtle forms of that, like a yellow-green crystal-looking structure, very tiny in the blood, in live blood. There's mucor racemosus, and we can watch it grow into an identifiable form. These are fungi that are actually part of our body's design. The mucor racemosus, in this line of research, they found that that's actually what gives us the shape, the structure of our blood vessels. There's another fungus that gives us the shape of our neurons. So just like the mitochondria gives us our ability to get 90% of our energy from aerobic metabolism, there's fungi that are symbionts. They're friendly. They're part of us. But when we're out of balance, they grow into their more advanced forms where they can reproduce, which they'll need to if we're not going to keep them alive and healthy and balanced. On the outside, we might see ringworm or yellow toenails, or thrush, or we have candida in the gut. And these tend not to be things that people die of very often. Like I say, it's still a fairly good high level of health, and we might not think that we have any problem. If we take our probably the single clearest thing would be to take your temperature, and if it's like, oh, I thought it was supposed to be 98.6, my temperature is low, you're probably in that phase 3 terrain if you're not otherwise, having illness. From there, if we go to phase 2, there's actually a